Hi, Robbie. My name's Ryan Dreyer with PokerDeals. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Of course, I'm really happy to finally make this happen for you guys. I hope everyone is well.
Yeah, we've obviously been you wanting to get to know you a little bit better, and we obviously wanted to understand, how things have been over the last year for you. So I
Mhm.
know it's been a quite a tumultuous ride.
Right, it has been. It absolutely, and it almost feels like it's been almost over a year, but it hasn't even gotten to that point yet. It just feels like so much has happened since that event occurred. And I've always said this, and I've stated this a few times in other interviews and podcasts I've done, and it feels like there was like life before the hand and life after the hand.
Yeah, of
So I'm in the
course.
middle of life after the hand.
Yeah, great.
Mhm.
Just let me just fill in anybody who doesn't know specifically about the hand. Robbie's a professional poker player, and she was involved in a hand at Hustler Life Casino, in which she made what could only be termed as an incredible call, and she was accused thereafter of cheating in the hand, and it created quite a stir in the poker world. So, Robbie, you're quite a poker icon. Being a woman, being an attractive woman, people have got eyes on you, and we'd like to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. And we obviously hear a lot that there's obviously very few women that play poker to begin with. And statistically, even at the World Series of Poker this year, there was even less than there were last year. So I know there's been these grand efforts made and continue to be made about allowing or figuring out a way for more women to play. But I do feel like because there's such few of us, that there are more eyes on us. So anything that happens is a little bit more magnified. Versus if I was a man, so to speak. But this whole event, as you did say, was incredible in many ways, and that adjective kind of can speak for itself prospectively, depending on who wants to perceive it their own way, so to speak. But it was. I felt that after it occurred, I did have this like weight on my shoulders as far as the responsibility I had as to what I did with my life following the incident
Okay.
and how I kind of sustained the injuries from the incident, so to speak, and also just how I moved forward and what I chose to do and the way I reacted. So I know that initially my reaction was really based on this emotional response that I think is natural when you're human to when you deal with something that you could never really prepare for.
Yeah, of course.
So it was more heightened response. Maybe not something I'm particularly proud of, especially in the first few days, I would say. I think near the end of the first week, I was finally kind of settling into myself and recognizing that this was something I had to live with. And the way that I reacted, responded, and how I moved forward was really going to be the way that I was going to be perceived and was really going to show the type of character that I am. And I think I finally kind of fell into the shoes that I had been walking in my whole life and started reacting the way that felt like I felt was more me. And I know lots of people say, "Well, I don't know how you got through it, Robbie." And it's the easiest answer, to be honest, is that I had no choice. So I just knew that I had to do something, and it was my path was always going to be forward and not staying stagnant or like jumping off of a bridge, so to speak. So here I am, and I feel like I feel like a much stronger person. I think that I have now overcome these obstacles in life that I think that some need to experience to be changed in a way that can actually be productive and positive for them. So for me, I felt like the change was uh, at this point now a something that I think I can look at as a positive effect in my life because first of all, we can't change anything that happens to us, and for me, anything that happens to us happens for us. And so in life, this happened for me. It happened for the poker community. I think that there needed to be some kind of like an ignition that needed to get off at the time that the event occurred for many reasons, whether we're looking at more safety parameters because this online live stream world is becoming more popular now,
Yeah.
or are we looking at it from a way that we just want more eyes on the sport, so to speak, or the game, or are we looking at it in a way to just kind of recognize that there still is a really big disparity that we are dealing with at the poker table, which kind of makes it exciting because that means that new players can sit with very experienced players, men can sit with women. So in that regard, it's not really the sport that we're used to understanding when we look at
Yeah.
other sports in the world. But it did kind of opened up a higher level of popularity after that incident occurred, and put more eyes onto it. And it had, I think, a positive effect in the end. And now poker is even more popular than anything. It was already moving that direction, but I think it only contributed to it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think there's been a lot of, publicity, and, for anything, publicity is good, be it good, bad, indifferent. If it brings it to the forefront, then it's going to create more hype, and, more people want to play, more people want to know what's going on. We'll come back to, obviously, the infamous hand a little later on, but what I'd like to do is learn a little bit about you. Like you said, you're a poker icon now in the eyes of the world, and obviously female poker players look up to you and they see you and they're like, wow, Robbi Lew. So can you tell us a little bit about you? Can you tell us, where did you grow up?
So I actually grew up in Northern California. Believe it or not, I wasn't born here. I was born in Saudi Arabia. It's so random, I know, but I did my family came to this country when I was 5 years old.
Okay.
I do have an identical twin sister, so I was able to share that moment with her, and a younger brother as well. But I grew up in Northern California, right in the Bay Area, right outside of San Francisco. And I ended up coming down to Southern California around to Los Angeles to go to school at UC Santa Barbara, where I studied pre-law, eventually starting off with my MBA. And then I just kind of dove right into the biopharmaceutical world. And I was there up until only like 2 or 3 minutes before, no, actually I would say April 2022. So several months before the hand actually happened. And it was just a random time where I decided to go on this sabbatical, so to speak. I was supposed to take what I would think at the time I had discussed would be around 6 months to kind of just, I'd been in this industry now for 15 years, and I had been very, very successful. I climbed that corporate ladder, and I just wanted to try something new. And it was kind of just a wave of inspiration that happened during the pandemic. Okay. So I've said this several times. I don't want to be redundant, but for those who don't know the story, I think that time when we're sitting in our homes and confined to smaller spaces around family members that were the only ones we were really allowed to have any contact with, it was kind of like an eye-opening situation. And not that I didn't appreciate the career that I was going on, but there was a lot of things that were on standstill, and it allowed an opportunity to open up for hobbies to be invited in. At the time, poker was just a hobby for me, and it was just something that I kind of invited my family to do so that we would have something else to discuss other than vaccines and the polarized political perspectives that were at the dinner table. So we started playing that regularly. I started kind of running a home game for fun. And I just kind of decided when the doors sort of opened back up that I wanted to take a different approach with it, and maybe just as a bucket list thing, go to the World Series of Poker. I was running a podcast at that time with one of my good friends in New York, and we were both big poker players, and we opened up this poker community chat situation, and a couple of us decided that we were going to do the World Series of Poker that year. That year was 2021, and they didn't have it in the summertime as they usually do. It was in the winter time. So, the following one actually just came 6 months right after. So when I went to that one, I had relatively good success working full time. But I realized that I really loved it even more so, the tournament kind of competitive side of it, which is what the tournament side would be, of course, at the World Series of Poker, since cash playing is different. Yes. And I decided to take on some coaches. And, professionally, I was able to financially provide myself the opportunity to have one-on-one coaching with the top coaches in the world. So for me, I decided to really take that leap of faith and kind of speed up the process of learning it on a more advanced level. And I understand, and it's not to say that I don't respect the fact that, of course, there are things in life that take time, but I knew that I didn't have as much time as everybody else. And I wanted to be playing in as many of the tournaments that I could in the following World Series of Poker, which was, again, only happening within 6 months of the time that I had been. So I jumped right in, and I started doing the beginning of 2022, realized that I needed to obviously take time away from work to be able to allow for that amount of time, because it does demand at least a full day during the week. And I gave it 8 hours a day.
Were you playing online?
Yeah, I was playing online a lot. I was lazy quite a bit. And I was also just I think I still am on part of at least 4 or 5 of the most popular poker training sites. Okay. And just learning as much as I possibly could, watching it live, training online, working with my coach, and just trying to speed up the process without letting it be too overbearing, and then going to some of the local things. But at that time, it was more so local private games. And I recognize that there's a big difference between the cash side versus the tournament side. So I really just focused on the tournament side during the mid 2022 season.
Okay.
Went to the World Series of Poker, had relatively good success there. I mean, just getting better and better at it. At that time, I didn't have a full-time job, so I was able to give it more attention. I wasn't able to, do the whole series. I think everybody got COVID, so I had to take 2 weeks off in the middle. But when I got back is when all the chaos started, because I was invited then at that time to come on Hustler Casino Live.
So yeah, how did that come about? I mean,
it happens a lot more casually than people see it. And I think that even today it's that way. So it's like somebody knows a producer and they ask you for you to be on the show. And before I knew it, Ryan, or I think it was like DGAF, was calling me or connecting me with Ryan. And it all happened within a week of being referred to speaking with Ryan. And I remember being on a text message basis and just deciding right then when I was going to be on the next show. And I was scheduled for the Wednesday show that only occurred about a week and a half prior to the incident. So by the time the Jack forehand happened, that was my third time being on live stream at Hustler Casino Live within 2 weeks. So it went from the Wednesday before, and then the Friday after, or I'm sorry, I think it was probably exactly 1 week was the Jack forehand from the very first time that I came on to Hustler Casino.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. I mean, I'm a poker player. I've played on and off my career, and obviously you get into situations where maybe a game you feel a little bit out of your depth or a little bit out of your league. Did you ever feel that? Like sitting in that game, sitting with Phil Ivey at the table? I mean, obviously everybody wants to play with Ivey, but everybody dreads playing against Ivey, right? So.
Well, that wasn't my first time playing with Ivey. When I was at the World Series of Poker, like I said, I was financially able to jump into the higher buy-in tournaments. So I played quite a few 10K tournaments, and he was actually in my 10K tournament for the Turbo at one of the later tournaments, only 2-3 months prior.
Yeah.
So, and I remember I had been in a few hands with him. And so it wasn't my first time playing him. I'm trying to think of anybody else on the table that would have really blown me for a loop. So I do want to clarify one thing, and I think that this might come off a certain way to people in the industry, but it was something that I think puts me in a different light. And that is that I didn't come into the world of poker having grown up watching it and idolizing all these players that I think many poker players do. So for me, there was even some players that reached out to me that I'm like, I didn't even know you're a big deal. And I think they're like, Sean Deeb took offense to that. He's like, do you know who I am? And I was like, like I had no idea that he was a good poker player, and he's a phenomenal poker player. And I recognize that now by being out there and playing. But there was very, very few names that I would be like, oh, okay, I recognize that name from it was like Phil Ivey, of course, is one of them, and Phil Hellmuth. But I wasn't impressed by it. And I never thought, I don't want to say that it's not like an egotistical thing. And maybe there is some part of that. I never thought I didn't belong sitting at that table. Okay. Now, in hindsight, of course, they're far more advanced than me. Yeah. But I think what we forget to understand is that we're all playing with each other's money. So we're bringing in our own bankroll, and whatever our own situations are with that bankroll is our own.
Yeah, sure.
So if I'm sitting there and willing to lose all my money, so be it. If anything, they should be happy to be playing with players like me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I never felt like I didn't belong. I never felt like I wasn't allowed to sit there. And even now, if you see it, I mean, what makes a game exciting is when you see different levels of, I guess, experience sitting at the table, different personality types, and people that come from different walks of life, and whatever their financial backgrounds are do impact the way that they play. But it is their own money to play with, and therefore I don't think it can be judged or perceived as whether they should or shouldn't be sitting at the table, whether they belong there, so to speak. I think the beauty of poker is that everyone has a chance to sit at the table with anybody else, and they do belong there as long as they're willing to throw down the money and the bankroll.
And did you feel like when the first time you ever sat in a big game like that, did you ever feel intimidated at all?
I think there's a very I think so. It's one of those things, naturally, I think we're all going to feel intimidated. We're sitting, very well that the whole world is watching, or as many people that are going to be watching. I did know that in that particular day, there was quite probably going to be the most people watching. It was a very interesting group of people, unique in that sense. And obviously, like you mentioned, Phil Ivey was there. But it wasn't something that I wasn't mentally prepared for. I came from an industry where I was always like the youngest person there trying to make a name for myself. So I was always sitting in really uncomfortable situations, dealing with really high stress situations, different personality types, and a lot of people that expected you not to do your very best because they expected something of you because of the degree of experience they think that you had. So for me, I was always fighting this uphill battle my whole life, and I was very comfortable in that very high stress situation. I'd grown up that way. I had been very familiar in that space, and I had overcome it several times. That wasn't my first time sitting in a high stress situation.
Yeah, that is one thing that I've found too, is that life and poker have a lot of similarities, and you can take them to the poker table, and how people are in life is how they're at the poker table. And you learn a lot about a person while you're sitting there watching them play poker. You learn a lot about a person. So another question for you. How do you feel women in poker, how do you feel it's progressing? Do you feel like, it's going up? I mean, my wife's a huge poker player. She loves it. Well, we've had some great fun together, and she loves playing poker. We've been to the series together too. So she understands it and she gets it. And she's obviously all for, a woman in poker, and she thinks she's the best poker player in the world. But she obviously, there are times where she feels, like a little bit, maybe bullied as a woman, or, not accepted as a woman at a poker table. So what are your thoughts on those kind of things?
I think that's a very realistic experience that she is probably dealing with. And I think if you ask any woman, there isn't one woman that would say that they haven't at some points in their poker playing experiences or I guess like career, if they're considering it a career, haven't felt that way sitting at a table, whether with all men or even just most men in another woman. I always sit down at a table, and if there's more than two women sitting there, it's like beyond me. It's a very rare occasion. And yes, I think that undoubtedly so you are going to feel at times, quite often, that you are not welcome there. But then there are those that heavily welcome you because they think that they have some kind of edge or advantage over you. And at that point, as you will learn from many coaches, if you take a lot of time, is that can be used to our advantage as women. Kind of like a reverse psychology situation, but it takes a lot of getting used to. So if you're not comfortable being in a male dominated environment, where I was very comfortable because I came from a very heavily male dominated industry to begin with, it's going to feel very uncomfortable. And you might actually not like you're looking for it, but I do think that there are times when you start to recognize this higher level of disparity and this change in the way that you are treated if you're not used to being in a heavily male dominated environment. That being said, I think inevitably so women are just treated differently because there is a big disparity, and you just don't feel like there's somebody that has your back, so to speak. Not that I want to say that there's a divide that is like increasing between the two genders, but there is some level of camaraderie that comes into having a little bit more of your people behind you a little bit. And I do think that if there's ever a system of like bullyism or a vibe that's happening there, it does feel a little isolating to be the only woman at the table. But do I think it's changing? I think that heavy and deep and really progressive efforts have been made to kind of have more women come and play. So of course we've seen like a lot of these women only tournaments that are increasing, and there's some people that have certain ideas about that, and I know there's like a man or two that'll kind of find their place into one of these tournaments, comically so, but regardless, I think that's at least making it more comfortable for women that are brand new to the game to be able to learn in an environment that's a little less burdening to them. So I think that is going to open up opportunities for all these women to finally be sitting at the table with both men and women. But it was very disappointing, I do have to say, Ryan, that when I saw the numbers for WSOP, to see that there was even less than there was last year. And I really do continue to question why that is, because what I continue to see is an ongoing effort and a growing effort to include more women into the game. And so to see numbers like that, I just wonder if there was some kind of alternative reason behind that.
Okay.
Or maybe I don't know, but I did even wanted to look into the statistics regarding that a little bit more. But I will say that I think that because of the efforts that are continuing to be made, that I do feel that more women will play, and I really hope that they do.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So, question for you: you're sitting in a big hand. Would you rather be up against a male or a female opponent?
I don't think it matters. It really doesn't matter. I think one of the things that you recognize is very experienced, highly respected poker players do not treat men and women differently at the table.
Yeah.
So I do want to say that there are the vast majority of poker players who are men, and they have been doing this for a very long time, recognize that poker is poker, and experience has nothing to do, and this emotional, I guess, resistance they have towards somebody at the poker is really just an amateur way of thinking. And I think they're mature enough to recognize that everyone should be treated the same, and that the hand in itself is compartmentalized to the hand itself. The experience itself is compartmentalized to the experience of the player and the way that you perceive them to be playing poker. So I personally, the more I play, I don't see myself playing against a man or a woman. I just see myself playing against a certain type of player that I hate to say, maybe like casted as a particular role as a certain type of player at the poker table if I've been playing at the table long enough. And it has nothing to do with whether they're a man or woman. I do not play with them any different.
Good. Okay. Another question. Do you prefer tournaments or cash games? I know so you said you kind of started getting going in tournament play. How did you make the transition because it is a big transition from tournament play to cash play. It is, especially in high stakes games.
For sure. Oh yeah. Well, first thing with tournaments is that you can't play a tournament with a couple of your buddies at home, right? I mean, you can, but it's not really gonna like change a strategy much there. You're just really gonna be playing the single table satellite situation at home. So what really makes a tournament setting is that when you finally decide to go into tournament, there's a bunch of eyes watching you. You really can't make too many mistakes. I mean, you can if it's a smaller game, but really you want to be pretty efficient as far as how to play the game before you jump into the tournament set. It's more competitive, so it's a completely different strategy, a different level of skill set. It requires and demands a lot more patience. You have to be folding a lot more hands. And cash games are just fun because there's immediate gratification. You could sit with any level of experience. You could be sitting in the confinements of your own home. You could be playing a lot more loosely. You could really pretty much be doing anything in a cash game if you're doing it in a private setting. If you do it in a casino setting, it's still a different vibe, right? I mean, you could jump in and out at any moment. I mean, you could play a hand and you can leave respectfully to the table, so to speak, if you want to be careful about that as well.
Sure.
But really, it is an immediate gratification, and you can leave if you win a big hand. In a tournament, you win a big hand, that's not going to put you in any position. So it's a completely different strategy in that regard. I think that when I first went to the World Series of Poker, well, I know that the first time I went to the World Series of Poker was actually was tournament number 2 that I ever played. And I think the second tournament I ever played, the first tournament I ever played was 4 months before I went to the first World Series of Poker in 2021. And I didn't place there, but the second tournament I ever played, I actually won first place. It was like 280 people. And it was just a WSOP, like when they're running their daily tournaments.
The daily 235, that one?
Yeah, it was 235 people, and it was, I don't know what the buy-in was. It wasn't anything crazy. It might have been $400. It was like one of the nightlies, and I won that one. Like, oh wow, this is really fun. How thrilling it is to be like finally sitting at the final table, and it just felt like a different sort of gratification. The money wasn't as big, of course, but there was a different level of satisfaction I got from that, and I recognized that the competitive side of me liked the tournament side. And the side of me that wanted like immediate thrill really appreciates the cash side. So for example, I'm coming back from a not very successful run at the Hard Rock Seminole. I just kind of I was there literally for only 48 hours. I jumped into the 5,300 main event tournament because it was such a great big prize pool, and I had some time over the week, and I thought, I am a very spontaneous person. I'll jump into flight and see what I could do. But anyways, my flight was delayed. When I landed, we were halfway through level 5. And so I didn't get the best, and I was on 0 sleep. So it was a red eye. So I didn't get like the best preparation to jump into that tournament, but I did get in there. And then I played a little cash afterwards, but I was in deep for like, I fired 2 bullets there. And then another one that was like a 2,800, bubbled that one. And now I'm coming back here, and I just got back here 2 days ago, and I'm like, okay, now I need to go play some cash games to make up for those losses. So I've got a game tonight, I've got a game tomorrow, and I've got a game the day after. And for me, like, I love the LA private game life because first of all, you become close with these players and they become your buddies, and I do enjoy spending time with a lot of them. And then you find the games that kind of fit your needs. They kind of feel fair because everyone is always concerned about the private games anywhere, really, about whether, again, cheating. Yeah. Like do you trust them? I trust the games that I go to. And for me, it's a way for me to make back any losses that I have in tournaments. And then get that immediate gratification of just getting my bankroll kind of back up again so I can go punt more money off in another tournament that I play in. But tournaments, of course, you have to put in a lot of buy-ins to get any type of return. Yeah. And I think that requires a heavy level of bankroll management, especially at the level that I want to play at. So that is the way I make up for that is in the cash games that I play.
Okay. So you're obviously winning. You're obviously winning in the cash games overall, I would assume.
Yeah, I have an overall winning streak on it if you total it all up, which is why I continue to go to those. But I will say that when I first started in both, I had no intention of, this is going to seem like a little careless, but I did come into the world of poker recognizing I wasn't going to be the best, and therefore I was going to lose money.
Yeah,
so I
school fees, they called it.
Several months losing a lot of money, and then spent even more money on live stream losing money.
Okay.
To the point where it almost would seem unfathomable to anybody to lose the amount of money that I have. But again, I came from an industry where I had saved quite a bit of my income to allot for those losses. And I'm starting to recognize the importance of bankroll management, unfortunately, almost a year after. But I do see that there is a very realistic way to make enough money to play. Maybe not enough money as far as how to... Sorry. I don't know how to fix that one.
So you were talking about the obviously bankroll management, and obviously there's a thing called school fees, which pretty much applies to everybody starting poker.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When you start, you're gonna pay. That's how it is. Until you see certain amount of hands, until you start getting some experience.
Yeah.
You're finding a losing battle.
That for me, I jumped really high. I do recognize that's the unique. I think that's kind of why everyone's like, who is this person that came out of nowhere that is sitting at this table with this? Like, I did start relatively high. But again, you can't really question anybody and what their personal financial situation is and why they belong or shouldn't belong at the table, so to speak. So for me, that's just where I wanted to start. Not that high. That was very high. Even when I play my, the cash games I play now, I recognize that is at a level I'm comfortable at. I was going through a crazy nosebleed situation when I first came back, doing like the 200, 400 games even here. And, it's such an uncomfortable feeling. Even the wins didn't feel like wins to me because I knew that the next week I was potentially just going to blow the 100K I just won. So I finally found the right footing for me as far as the stakes that I'm comfortable with.
And where about is that?
For me, so it's crazy because some of the games just play really big.
Yeah.
And I've been told this over and over again. So I play both PLO and No Limit. And the PLO games, it's like anywhere between 10-10 to tonight is 50-100, and it could straddle to like 200. But that's because it's PLO. And then for the No Limit side, I'm the most comfortable at 10-25 when I'm playing like a very long session with a bunch of people. Again, it plays really big because of the straddles that are put into place and how many times that people are re-straddling. So it just feels better to be sitting at the table with like 5K and then being able to rebuy as opposed to like recognizing that I don't have any advantage unless I bring 50K to the table, sitting at like a 200, 400 game, which always looks like the smallest stack anyways to begin with.
Yeah.
But the highest I'll go is my PLO 50, 100 game, but that I absolutely love. And yeah, I'm prepared to lose a lot there, but there's people that start at that game with just 4,000 or 5,000 too, and they just keep adding on. So it's like more fun, it's more loose. It's, you know, you can kind of like repot and be in an all-in situation and just keep rebuying. So it's a different kind of strategy in every cash game I play in, and I think that's what kind of makes it more exciting.
Yeah, you have to tailor your game to whatever you're playing in, and obviously you get to recognize them the more you play.
Yeah, and PLO's new to me, and I'm just starting to get kind of used to that too. So I love taking on a handful, that's for sure.
It can be a little bit addictive. PLO. Yeah. And then you start playing 5 and 6 card PLO, and then you'll be.
Yeah, that might not be something I get into, but we'll see. We'll see how.
Depends on how much you like to gamble. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the hand that happened last year. First of all, I mean, how did you get into that game? You said that was like your third time you played in that game.
Yeah.
And you just kind of got invited through some players.
It was a really I was invited to this guy named Beans. I had also been invited by another friend of mine, Schwan, and we just it kind of was like, I already got invited to that game. I was playing at Bike at the time, and I just won a tournament there. I'd won first place at the tournament at the Bike, and they were running. I don't know if it was live at the Bike or something was happening, and somebody from there came up to me and was like, Robbi, have you ever considered live stream? I was like, I had been asked a few times before. But I always thought it was so strange that people would want to expose the way they play online, I guess, publicly to the world. I had never really seen anything before. I remember catching little snippets of like the Hustler game on when you just get on YouTube and you can go down a rabbit hole and it would kind of show up. So I knew I'd be like, oh, that's so interesting. I could see their hands. Yeah. But it's kind of like when you see anyone's hands when you're looking. But I really thought it was actually live that we were looking at these people's hands. So that was always something that I wasn't like super interested in, but I think that I finally just kind of gave it, and I said, yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot. It really happened as casually as that. Like, okay, I'll give it a try. Well, when I first came and gave it a try, Ryan, the first game that I played, I think I broke kind of even, maybe like plus 1K. And Ryan came and was like, would you like to play again? I was like, sure. He's like, how about this Friday? And I'm like, okay, great. And I played again that Friday, and I won like 100 or something thousand in that game. And then he asked me, he's like, well, you want to play next week? We have a big game with whatever. And I think I'd asked like, oh yeah, I'd love to actually play with those people. Like I went out of my way to say like, oh no, I'd really love to. He's like, hey, if you want to play in it, I can get you in that game. And so he scheduled me for that following, it was either Wednesday or Thursday when the hand happened. Okay. And I was scheduled for that. So I think it was Thursday. And he had actually also scheduled me for the day right after. And I remember thinking like, am I going to be allowed to play tomorrow? And then realizing that probably, he's like, at that time they were actually going to schedule me to play again tomorrow. But I think more, obviously they recognized it was a bigger deal, what was happening. Yeah. And so of course I was scheduled for that Friday as well. And I probably would have just kept going on. And I probably would have been playing a lot of live stream with them had that hand not happened.
All right, cool. So I've got, obviously people want to know these things, and there's a question there was, I've read some stuff, I've heard some stuff that Rip was bankrolling you in that game.
He wasn't bankrolling me 100%. I had taken my 100,000 that I had won, actually 113 or something on that Friday, and it was already in my HCL bank, and he banked the remainder. Okay,
so what did you sit down with in that game? Like 200?
I had a buy-in of about 100 and probably exactly what the entire thing was. So I sat down at the table with 100,000, and I had 130,000 behind me.
Okay, all right, cool.
Almost exactly.
Okay.
Maybe like, you know what? The numbers I know are online. I've kind of like just erased memory. I want to say somewhere between 250. Maybe I sat with 120. Something at the table, but I had divided it as in 2 different buy-ins. So I wasn't going to sit with 100% of everything that I had to say. It was, and I remember thinking that a lot of the reason that I was like, was like, I looked at the stack next to me and I was like, I have another 130.
Yeah.
That's really the way I was thinking. I was like, I don't get to like get up and leave. I still have. So
So, I mean, I have a question kind of off the beaten track. And I know from my own poker life that I was backed at some times, and I've been backed in some tournaments and ended up sitting at the same table with the guy that backed me. Did you find that to be awkward at any point?
I didn't want it at all. And I wasn't aware that he was even playing in that game until that morning.
Okay.
So what ended up happening was that there is somebody, and it's interesting, I actually know the person. He wrote me, he's like, I feel like none of this would have happened if I had showed up. He either like missed his flight, I think it was Haroon was his name, or something. He was supposed to be sitting at that table in Rip's spot, and because he didn't make it, they of course need to fill that spot. And it was a very last minute decision decided, where either I think Ryan reached out and said, hey, can you play? And I think Rip's like, well, I wasn't really planning on it. He's like, well, you could just play with like 50K or something.
Okay.
And, I mean, I think Rip knew that he was probably just going to blow that 50K or whatever. And they just decided that very moment that he was going to play. When I found out about it, I was like, that's a little weird. And I remember talking to Ryan about it. And I don't know if he recognized what I was trying to say, because I knew that he was giving me some amount of money. And this is where there's like that gray area that happens. And again, even to this day, I don't think there's anything wrong with anybody, of course, backing anyone.
Yeah, no problem.
It was like a level of like somebody needed to be disclosed. I mean, swapping happens all the time where people are sitting there and they've swapped.
Shares, yeah.
Like, it was there at that game, believe it or not. And so like, that's like the unwritten rule that nobody discusses. I mean, we have a lot of gray areas in poker to begin with. And so I did not feel comfortable with him sitting there, and I definitely didn't feel comfortable with him sitting in front of me, and I was not prepared to have him playing that day.
Okay, oh, that's very interesting. All right, so let's talk about the crazy hand that happened, right? So if I remember correctly, you were under the gun, or you straddled, right? You straddled.
He was in the big blind, and I was.
You straddled to 800.
The gun.
Yeah, so he opens to 3,000. Jack 4 offsuit. Is that a hand that you? Obviously, I understand that at the time you might have been a lot looser than you are now. I think you've obviously learned a lot. But I'm saying, was that?
Here's
Is that
what
a
I'm
hand?
thinking. I'm thinking he's making everybody straddle. Kind of annoying to begin with, right? I mean, we're playing I think it was a 200, 400 game, so we're already straddling to 800. And then I'm like, oh, it's just you and me, And I'm like, heads up.
Yeah.
Like heads up, things change a lot, right?
Yeah,
suddenly even ranges open up. I don't think it's really in my range. It might be like right on the edge to play Jack 3 or Jack 4. So I just thought, hey, why not? I'll check the flop out. So I threw it in, just called it.
Okay, cool. So then
and it's so crazy, Ryan, because at that very split second, it was like I was like, no, I'll fold, and I was like, nah, maybe I'll call. It was like so instant. There was absolutely no preparation and thought at that moment. It was just like, screw it, I'll call.
Yeah, I don't want to fold. Yeah.
Yeah. Like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
Maybe I'll win it. Whatever.
Yeah. So then the flop comes 10, 10, 9 with 2 clubs, and he flops. Obviously, we know what he flops, the straight flush draw. And there's a bet, and you call. What is your thinking on the flop?
I mean, and there's 2 clubs on the board, so I have a backdoor situation. I think another thing that maybe we don't have to bring this up right now, and it wouldn't have even. Well, let's just leave it at that. So I'm looking at a backdoor situation, and I was going to stay in the hand at that point. It was interesting enough for me to keep going.
Yeah,
it wasn't enough for me not to call.
Yeah, look, I mean, I get it. There's a lot of good turn cards for you.
Yeah.
There's all the 8s, all the clubs, all the queens.
Right.
You've got a lot of good turn cards. So I mean, I get that, and I can see the call on the flop, and then obviously the turn brings the old 3 brick, and he leads out 10K, and you min raising, you click him back. Is that? I mean, what was your thinking on the min raise?
So 2 things. First of all, and I've said this before, and I even said it in an interview halfway through, and I will clarify why the story had even changed. I 100% at the point that I was holding Jack 3.
Okay.
So the hand prior to that hand, I was holding Jack 3. So that could be a big reason why there's a misread on my end in that regard. I was told after the entire game had finished, even after the incident had occurred, that Robbi, you can't run with your Jack 3 story, which I had already openly filmed. I think Raver Poker had filmed it on the side in the hallway after the hand happened. I thought it'd be good to clarify that. And And I had already explained to them that I thought I was holding Jack 3. And I had even told Garrett when I handed him the second stash of, went back to give him the extra 5,000 after he recognized that hadn't given him 130, that I said, would it make you feel any better if I told you that I actually thought I was holding Jack 3? And so he already even knew it at that point. It was already said to him. It was said on camera. And I was told to change my story again because he said, Rob, you kept looking down at your cards. And that actually really confused me and threw me for a loop, because I'm like, I'm looking at the video where they're showing me looking, and I'm like, I was looking down at my cards. I'm like, but I don't know that I was registering what I was looking at. Kind of those things, like I looked down at my card a few times when I had pocket aces against Phil Ivey.
But you're just pretending to look at them.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're looking down to figure out what to do next, and to obviously allot for some time to pass where there's no reads happening for you, and deciding on what your bet sizing is and what your next move is. But I'm not really registering what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I've already decided that what I'm holding is Jack 3, and I'd already seen that I had the Jack of clubs. So for me, when the turn card came, to me, it was a bluff catcher, if anything.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he has ace high, which I even kind of put him on. You know, somebody asked me, or Andy asked me, like, or no, somebody said, what do you have? You got pocket threes? I said no, because I wasn't holding pocket threes.
Yeah.
And like pocket threes is an instant call.
Yeah.
That would give me a full house. So it's not, do you have a pair of three? What I thought he was saying was like, do you have pocket threes? And I thought that when I did the min raise on the turn, for me, it was just temperature checking to see if he had something better.
Okay.
And it wasn't, I was really hoping he would fold. I was like, he's going to fold now, right? Because for me, that what he bet wasn't big enough. It was kind of just to see if I'd stay. And so I was min raising, and I didn't think he would go all in at that point whatsoever.
Okay.
But
and then when you got the shock of him going all in, you know, obviously now you've got a decision to make, especially if you got to think you're holding Jack 3. You know, is he on a draw? Is my 3 good? Obviously, those are the things that are going through your mind. You know, if that's what you believe you hold.
I had played with Garrett I hadn't played with Garrett a lot, but I had been in hands with him in the previous 2 times that I was on that live stream. And looking back at those live streams, I had seen certain hands that he had played against me, and there were certain calls that I had made that were accurate when you know, others might have considered folding.
Yeah.
So I just looked at him, and I just had this feeling that he just didn't have it yet.
Yeah.
And he was hoping to get there. And I think I did mention at that point, like, you know, him having potentially ace high. I don't know if it was at that point or after. I actually don't watch that hand back. It re-traumatizes me.
Yeah. I get
So I really don't watch it back. But I did mention, I think at some point during that hand, that I thought maybe he was sitting on ace high, which would make me win the hand with my bluff catcher, so to speak, being the 3.
Yeah, look, I think obviously some of the confusion, you know, like I understand you thought at some stage you were holding Jack 3 and you thought you had a 3, which was beating any draw, any ace high. I get it, right? So, but then obviously when they asked you, do you have a 3? And you said no. So I think at that point you had actually looked at your cards and seen that you had Jack 4, and now you didn't know what to say. You were like, oh my God, I've got Jack 4. What the hell? Did you ever feel like that?
I didn't realize that I had Jack 4 until I flipped it over, and you could see the shock on my face at that point. Yeah. I don't remember realizing that I had Jack 4 until I flipped it over.
Okay.
Now, if it looks like I noticed it before or like after I made that call, the actual surprise and shock came to me was when I flipped the cards over, and just being like, I can't believe I have Jack 4, and then realizing
that Jack 4 was good.
It still didn't even read that it was good. Like I couldn't, and I'm like, you have what? Like I remember being like, you have 8 high. Like what? I mean, he had better than 8 high, really, but I mean, like in theory, he had 8 high, right? So it's like, it just like, and then just to have not even won any of the run outs. Like one of the things that I also knew going in is I always run it twice. And from what I understand, he always allows. I mean, I've never seen him not say that he wouldn't allow it to run it twice.
Yeah.
So there is that element in cash games that there's a little bit of like leverage you can have against somebody else, or I guess like a safety zone or a safety net you can have if you go all in prior to the river card. So I always like that about cash games, is that, you know, there's a chance to kind of at least maybe split the pot if you don't have it right then, or somebody else catches something on the river, or maybe you catch something on the river, like a two-pair situation. But I felt a little bit more comfortable making that call, recognizing that we could run it twice, and and just from my experience with him, kind of questioning whether he even had it at that point or not.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, at least it makes more sense, you know, if you think that you had the Jack 3, you know, it was actually a serendipity, right? A happy accident.
Yeah. And then the fact that I didn't even win with Jack 3. Yeah, it's just the whole thing. It's like, I've said this before too, is that it was like the perfect storm of everything that could have like been shocking happened that day. Let's not even forget the incident of what happened after with like the stolen chips and everything that just kind of added to the chaos and the mystery. But it was like everything that like needed to happen for it to be this like massive, like, you know, hyper like inflated story happened at that very moment in that very hand between like two people sitting with this group of people with all these eyes watching it, and like in a hand that I shouldn't have even won. And people always question, like, had he won the hand, like, would we even be here? Would it have even been discussed? Would he have? Of course, he wouldn't have gotten up or left or anything, but because he would have won. But would that? How much would that have changed things? And I think significantly so.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the fact that he lost the hand and they ran it twice and he lost both runouts is very unlikely. You know, everything about the hand is so unlikely that you can understand his perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like,
well, no, I've said this so many times, and the one thing that I will say, because there's a lot of things I can say against Garrett, and I still think that there was many things that he handled very, very, very extremely poorly. But the one thing that I will say, and I will never fault him for this, is I will never fault him for the shock that he felt after seeing the call that I made. Of course, it's very surprising that I would make that call, and I also don't feel that many people make calls like that against Garrett. No one's hero calling against him. So I think he's also very not used to a place where somebody would do that to him. Yeah. And that's just where the ego comes in place. But I had ego sitting there at that table, you know, playing a hand like that against him as well. So I think we all have certain faults that we bring to the table that are like human traits and mishaps that we have to just deal with just by being human in nature. So I can't ever fault his surprise or his level of shock. It's how he handled the situation that I think him in a position that many do not see favorable.
So after the hand, obviously there was some kind of an altercation in the back between yourself and Garrett and Rip. And how did he approach you? What did he say to you?
Altercation. So, well, I mean, yes, I guess it's how you see it. So everything that happened after that so right after the hand happened, believe it or not, the game went on. You know, there was a lot of snide remarks made after Garrett at some point got up and left. He wasn't sitting at the table anymore. And then the little snide remarks came. There was kind of like some snickers made on the way that he was kind of responding that was not seen favorably by some of the players at the table. At that moment, I did not at all think that he wasn't going to come back. I thought he was just being a big baby, having lost that hand. And I had gotten over past the fact that I had accidentally won a hand. And so we just continued playing. It wasn't until I think it was Luis that came and he tapped my shoulder and he said, "Garrett wants to talk to you." So now this is sort of like the divide between the certain group of people that would say that they would have absolutely never gotten up and gone to go speak to him. And most of the people that say that are men. And most women would say that they would have probably gone up and spoken to him because, first of all, out of respect for the fact that he is their star player, I was going to do that. And I'm fairly new to this live stream situation, and I'm going to respect the producers. And if a producer comes and asks me to get up and go to speak to Garrett, I'm going to go up and speak to Garrett. I have no idea what he wants to talk about. I automatically assumed it had something to do with the hand. I did not think of what we know now, that he was going to be accusing me of anything. So I get up and I start walking out, and immediately I see him and Ryan, and they're already walking. So they're already walking away from me, obviously insinuating that I should follow them. And so I was following them, and we're just walking, and we're walking through the first main room, and then there's another room, and then there's another section where you're kind of going past the main poker room, and a little hallway, a little dark hallway that kind of separates like the cashier from like the locker room or something on the left. Not the very first locker room that sits directly from the live stream room. We're talking about several rooms away. So we walked a bit through two different poker rooms to get there. We are out of sight for most anybody that was standing there. And I saw Garrett with his little backpack on, and he just looked, he had that same look on his face. And Ryan was pacing back and forth, very stressed out. And he's like, Ryan's like, can you just explain to him, can you explain to him why you made that call? And I'm like, what? Okay. So I was like, Garrett, what's going on? Like, what do you need me to explain? And he's like, well, like, you know that there's millions of people watching this, right? Or over a million. He mentioned like, and I'm like, yeah, so I never ever like thought for a second that what he was trying to say was that a million people are going to be watching you cheating. I don't know if that's what he was trying to say when he said there's a million people watching you. I'm like, yeah, so I thought he was upset about the fact that a million people would watch the fact that I made a call and he lost a hand he should have won. Like, I'm like, is this what people do when they lose hands that they should have won? Like, for me, this is how naive and like new I am to not only the live stream world, but I literally am like, am I supposed to just fold to players that are better than me? Like, is this just out of respect? And I immediately at that moment, I'm like, well, look, he is a player. His face is on the friggin' billboard outside. You know what I mean? And I'm looking at Ryan, and he seemed so stressed out. And I felt bad. I really felt bad for the showrunners that they were having to experience or deal with something. And I'm immediately thinking that there's 2 empty spots now at the table. And I don't know if I'd asked Ryan Denner before. I'm like, are you guys stopping like running the show so like we can handle this? And he's like, no, we're gonna keep it running. And I'm like, wow, okay, so I got to figure out a way for me to get him and me back at the game, because this isn't going to be a good look. And I don't want to contribute to the fact that it was going to not be a good look for the producers that have been very kind for me. So for me, like, my first and foremost train of thought was to respect production. I mean, that is literally what I was thinking. I was like, how do I make it so that it doesn't impact production poorly or negatively? And I looked at Garrett, I'm like, what do you want from me? I was like, we need to get back in there and play. Like, what can I do to make this better? What do you want? He's like, well, you could start by giving me my money back. And I'm like, what? And I look around, I was like, did you just hear what he asked for? And Ryan's like, Robbi, I can't have any part in this. I'm gonna pretend like I didn't hear that. And of course, understanding now, like, they're not dealing with the transactions regardless. Yeah. And for any of the players, I mean, if they're going to deal with anything transaction wise, the producers can't be involved.
Yeah, sure.
So I understand why he couldn't have any say in that. And of course, he was very heavily like high stressed. He was standing a few feet away from me where he could hear what we were saying, but he couldn't contribute to the conversation. And I was like, so like what? And I stopped. I was like, how much is a pot? And he's like, 269,000. I was like, so if I was like what, like you want 130,000 back? And he's like, yeah. And I just like paused for a second. I'm like, okay. So in my mind, the way I broke it down was like, it would be like I won one of the runouts and he won one of the runouts.
Yeah.
Like, is that big a deal? I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll give you back half the money which is half the pot, if you come back and play and you finish the entire stream. I was like, that's one. 2, you don't keep players from playing the game, because what I had heard the night before and from other players is that he decided who got to play at the table with him, which was already sitting unwell with several players that had just equal right to be sitting at that table that day. And I said, and 3, you've come back and finished the stream. And he said, he's like, okay, all right. I was like, okay, great. Well, then let's go back in there and I'll give you those chips. So we walk back in there, and I'm sort of in a state of shock. I remember thinking, like, did he just ask me for the chips back? And am I really giving him the chips? Like, but I kept like justifying it to myself. I remember thinking I was justifying to myself. I'm like, well, it's kind of like you won one of the 2 runouts.
Yeah.
2 runouts, you shouldn't have won it all. And I will say that the deep down feeling that I was getting was like this kind of feeling where I felt like I misread my hand and it was my fault that we were even in that situation to begin with. So I'm already like blaming myself for certain situations that I misread the hand. Then I'm kind of feeling bad that I actually won the hand. Now I'm feeling extra bad for the producers and feeling like I'm contributing to like this absence in the room, adding to the drama. So for me, it was, how do I alleviate this drama and how do I alleviate the stress?
Yeah,
well, it was my fault. I misread the hand.
Yeah.
It was, I guess it's my fault that I won the hand. And I guess the very best outcome that I could have gotten from the situation, if it was a fair situation, is that I actually won one of the runouts and not both of them. I mean, should be the absolute best outcome for the situation I was in.
And I'm sure at the stage you kind of wanted to be over, right?
It to myself while I'm walking back in there, and I go to grab, which ironically is the exact amount that he needed, that it was sitting to the side. So I went to go give it to him, and at that very moment, he's like counting it, and I tell him, would it make you feel any better if I told you that I thought I was holding Jack 3? And I remember he kind of looked up to me. He's like, yeah, I think that would make me feel better. And then he was like, oh, you're short 5. Like telling me that I was missing the 5,000 chip. So really, in theory, I'd given him 125,000. And I'm like, really, you want me to go back in there and give you 5? Oh, okay, I'll go give you 5,000, Garrett. So I go back in there, and that is when, like, first of all, everybody was like, what is she doing? And I don't know, anybody can watch it back. It's all filmed. So whatever the conversation was, I guess when I first went to go pick up my thing, everyone's like, what did she just do? And so already everyone's talking in that room about what is she doing, and while they're trying to play. And when I go back in there and I go to pick up a single 5K chip, a chocolate chip, is when Rip noticed what I was really doing. And of course, it looks even worse that Garrett would be demanding an extra single 5,000 chip when I just gave him 125. I mean, in theory, he owes me like $500 because if you really divide the pot evenly.
Yeah, exactly.
But so when I went back out there is when Rip kind of recognized what was happening and flipped out. And of course, there's a lot of things happening there. One, a lot of that is his money. 2, this is somebody that they feel is being bullied into giving the money back. And 3, Rip didn't think there was anything wrong in winning a hand, and he 100% knew that I didn't cheat. And so for him, he's like, what in the hell is going on? And how can demand or allow this woman to be giving this money back?
So in the moment, like when you obviously turned over your hand and you had Jack 4 and not Jack 3, I mean, obviously you've got like these feelings going on inside, and you think to yourself, are you too embarrassed to say that, shit, I thought I had Jack 3?
Totally. And that's one of the biggest. So there's certain things I regret doing. I don't regret anything happened, because I feel like I've often said this, that there's a butterfly effect to the way I think about wanting to change things that have happened in my past.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I just feel like I wish I did is I just wish I said, I admitted to the fact that I thought I had Jack 3.
That would have changed the whole situation completely.
Yeah, it's very evident from my face. And, maybe they could look back and be like, oh, no, she looked at her hand. But regardless, like at that very moment, it would have made a whole lot more sense. But to be fair, it made sense to the entire table. And to this day, everybody at that table still believes 100% that they thought that I thought I had Jack 3.
Yeah.
And you'll hear them even say that in an interview shortly after. I think Felipe and Eric both said it. They're like, we strongly believe that she thought that she had Jack 3.
I saw Felipe
and it really
say that.
is the only thing that makes sense. And after the investigation is completed, no one's come out, and there was a bounty of $250,000 that I'm sure anybody that cares about money would have taken. The only absolute thing that makes sense is that I thought I was holding Jack 3.
Yeah.
Or here holding like a crazy person, I guess. I have no idea.
But you have, history on your side now, because even Daniel Negreanu calls Jack 4 the Robbi.
Yeah, I did.
So, I mean, you're in good company with Doyle Brunson.
Well, because in theory, I was holding Jack 4. So I was the whole time playing Jack 4. It really doesn't matter what I thought I had.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I mean, I'm sure you're getting pretty tired, but a couple of last questions. Like, how have you dealt with the aftermath of all of it? I mean, you must have had some really depressing times afterwards. You must have, there must have been times when you walked into a poker room and felt like everybody's looking at you, and some people are saying you're a cheater, some people are on your side, How do you deal with that on a daily basis? And very brave of you to literally get right back on the horse, carry on playing. You didn't hide, you didn't, say, well, I'm not going to play poker again. You're very brave, and for that I commend you.
Thank you for that. I went through a roller coaster of emotions. So I think that the first few days felt like an eternity and they were very up and down. It was really dependent on when you caught me. I was either in a really positive mood or I was feeling really down. I was feeling very defensive. Sometimes I was feeling overly um, confident in my ability to move forward. I had a heavy level of support from my family and friends who knew me from a very young age. So they knew that that was a very me thing to do when I made that call. And nobody, absolutely nobody in my very close friend group, in my family group, believed at all that I was being accused of something accurately, so to speak. And so I had that heavy support from them. And really, a lot of them just felt that was so ridiculous, it didn't even need to be discussed. So getting that level of support was really, I guess it was imperative for my ability and uh, the momentum that I needed to kind of move forward a little bit more quickly than others might have been able to do so. Furthermore, I did take a few weeks off. So I did take a few weeks off, and it wasn't until I got a call from like the WPT director, Matt, and like a couple of my people that I'd already been playing home games with here in LA. They're like, "Where are you? When are you coming back? We all support you, Robbi." And so then getting a lot of support from the community was really pivotal for me to move forward. And I found that most people were really on my side. But I had put myself and started hiding in this hole because I just didn't know what people thought. And I didn't want to put anyone in an awkward position to have to include me in anything because of all the publicity that surrounded around me. So I sort of waited to have people reach out to me as opposed to me reaching out to them. And what I found was the overwhelming amount of love and support that I was receiving from those that I just was very unsure as to how they would respond to the incident. And I have to this date been I have been welcomed with open arms to every single tournament series that I was already going to. That was really kind of uplifting and motivating as well. And even prior to the entire investigation being complete, I never felt like I wasn't included or invited or allowed to be in any game that I was playing in already or any tournament that I wanted to be part of. I did slowly move my way into the tournament sector. It wasn't immediate and it wasn't with a bang. It wasn't like, it wasn't many. I was playing more of the higher upper ones, like the 10Ks and like 5K here and there. But I didn't feel super comfortable. But what I did realize that was really eye-opening and shocking to me, and I hate saying this, was the level of celebrity that I wasn't prepared to deal with, where it was almost like just became so uncomfortable. And I decided right then and there, what am I going to do? Just walking, just like from the moment that I'm like at the airport and on a plane. Like I couldn't even get privacy on a plane going to Vegas. So I was like, oh shoot, is this really like, is it going to be like this? And it was like from the moment that I'm on the plane, from like the flight attendants to anybody sitting around or near me, to like I'll be getting coffee and just having eyes on me and people being like, are you like B Robbi? And just being like, oh my gosh, like it's like everywhere I turn, I'm like, is it just because it's Vegas? And I realized that I was like, wow, this is going to be something else that I have to deal with. So I thought at first I'd be like, no, thank you guys, when they wanted a photo. And then just something hit me when I was like getting money out of the ATM. And this really sweet woman came up to me and she was like, I never really cared about poker. My husband always played, but you really inspired me to play. And I'm like getting money out of the ATM and I'm like, really? And she was like, you made me feel like I could sit with these cowardly boys and play. And she just started spilling the story and I'm like, wow, what if I just embraced it?
Yeah.
And she was the reason that I want to embrace it. I don't want to say what her name is or anything because I know I could find her because I ended up taking my first photo with her and finally feeling comfortable. And then from that moment, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to embrace it.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody I can impact on that type of level, then I'm gonna turn this and make it a positive approach and kind of started like thinking a little bit more. I know, like, look, I had already taken on a PR team to help with the negative press. And they had also said, like, how are you going to move this to work in your favor? There's so many things you can do to but I just wasn't even thinking on those parameters. I'm like, just please save my reputation. Like, I mean, I was just like, save my reputation from this, like, even if I'm like acquitted of these charges, like just save me from that was really what my intentions were for employing those group of individuals. But when I saw her story, and then from then on, like anybody that came up to want to take a photo, I went out of my, I was like, absolutely. What's your name? What's your story?
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, I'm just going to embrace this. And, I got criticized heavily for doing it for the fame. And then also now embracing the fame. Like, is this what Robbi wanted the whole time? No, like I never asked for this, but because it now landed on my lap, I have this responsibility to either deal with these people that look at me as a certain icon, just like you mentioned. And if I can even impact like 1 out of 10 people that want to take a photo with me that have, not just because like I'm this like person that they could show their buddies home, whatever. Like I'm willing to take as many photos and be as kind to anybody that approaches me and has any level of positivity towards me. There isn't any time that I even ever felt offended. And there's times that people would literally do something ridiculous, like come up to me and like take a photo of me and run away. And I'm like, whatever, like that's so ridiculous. I mean, like there will be other people laughing around, and they did that quite a bit at the World Series. But, and it was very disruptive at times, but I decided right then and there that I'm going to embrace it. And if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to just show a side of resilience and a way to kind of get back on your 2 feet and fight against like the wave of resistance that can come towards anyone's way when they're brand new to any industry, especially a very male-dominated industry that's already very difficult for women to sit in, and be able to overcome an obstacle that many of us will never, ever be prepared to deal with, and be the right type of example for those that want to play something that is already an uncomfortable environment for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with celebrity comes great responsibility, and it seems like you're on the right track. So I'm really happy to hear that.
I appreciate that.
All right, well, I'm sure we're nearly done. Quick question. You made an April Fool's joke about a book that was released. That was pretty fun. What about releasing a book?
So, well, okay. So first of all, that April, there's still people that come. They're like, "Can I please get a signed copy?" And I'm like, "Did you guys not get the secondary message, which is that book that was an April Fool's joke?" And it was funny because that was actually.
I got that right, just in case.
I mean, it was supposed
maybe
to
I was
be
wrong.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in January, and when Poker News came to me, they were very nervous about whether they thought I would say no to it, because it was a little early. It was a little early, and I'm like, is it too soon to make a joke out of that? But they're like, but it won't be until April, and by then it would have even more so dissipated the accusation side of it. So it was really fun that they did that, and I'm glad that I was a part of that. And no, I don't have an actual book. I do have a book coming out. There's a couple of things in the woodworks that were very, I guess, they're inevitable. I hate to say it. I thought about it, and I've spoken to my agent too, and I'm like, do I have to do this documentary? Do I have to do it? And he's like, this is a story that's going to be part of the world of poker for a long time.
Yeah, agreed.
And you're going to either have to do the documentary or they're going to do it without you. I'm like, well, can they really do a documentary without me? So both parties have signed in on something that's happening there. And as far as the personal book is, it's a different twist to the book. I think that even to this day, and I'm like, aren't people tired of hearing about the hand? And what I do find surprising is that I guess people are not. And I think that over time, when the story behind the hand, for those that experience a hand at the time that it happened, that might not be as exciting for them. The new age of poker players might be interested in hearing about the story. So I do understand the relevance of the story moving forward. I'm open to, I'll probably be even more comfortable discussing it as more time goes on. But there is a level of trauma that I think comes from even like the idea of stepping foot back into Hustler Casino.
Yeah, sure.
Did do it one time to play a private game with Phil Hellmuth and a couple of the influencers. But it was a late night session after we came back from a charity poker tournament. And I've never asked to kind of be back on. I don't think they need me. They definitely don't need Garrett anymore. That is a show that is now thriving. But I'm very cool with the producers there, and I will say that the story will continue to live on, and I am in a place now where I can potentially talk about it more freely, from a more positive approach as to like, what did this do for the poker community, and where are we now moving forward from that? Yeah. And I think that goes for all parties involved. What did we all learn from it, and what can we do differently if it ever is to happen again?
Okay, last question. what's next for you? Are you done with working? Is poker the new you?
So interestingly enough, I don't even know how I could go back to my career. Again, like I said, my big concern was the reputation that I felt was, I guess, heavily barred from the accusation put into place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, because of the fact that there's always going to be a dark cloud over anybody that Googles my name and sees all the publications and conversations around it, it's something I would have to address from the corporate world that I was part of. I came from the business side of biopharmaceuticals, heavily corporate related. And I know that a concern for them would be because of would it, I guess, interfere or distract from my role? I don't know. I've spoken to a lot of my previous directors and they would welcome me with open arms. But for me right now, I think I have this continued responsibility to remain in the industry that changed my life significantly, publicly. And I think that there is a lot more that needs to be done before I can close this phase of my life, if ever I do choose to close it.
All right, that's great. Robbi, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it here at PokerDeals. Thank you so much. I hope it hasn't been too stressful for you, but I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it as well. I'm so happy that we were finally able to have this conversation. So,
how did your tournament go the other day? Because you made it to day 2, right? Yeah.
I did. I always make it to day 2. I always make it to day 2. I don't really need to discuss the coolers. I got pretty close to cashing, and then I just didn't get there. And then I was able to play a couple of cash games with some buddies. That was a little bit of the reason also that I wanted to be out there. And I won some of the money back. And I always love going to Hard Rock Seminole. They treat me very well. And it was a very short trip, and I'm happy to be back. I will be back in the tournament grind. There's quite a few things happening. So for anyone that's interested, I'm always at the major main events that are happening usually around the nation. But I will probably be at the big one in LA at the end of this month. And then, of course, we've got WPT and WSOP that are going to be coming up right after that. December is going to be a huge month for that as well. So I am going to be in the tournament scene and in the cash scene. And everyone's wondering when I'm going to go back on live stream. I will go back. Yeah. I don't know if it'll be Hustler Casino, but if ever that happens, I'm sure the whole world will be watching.
Well, if ever you make it out to Malta and there's a couple of big poker tournaments here.
I was just there. I don't know if you know this, but I did a podcast with the iGaming guys.
Okay.
And I was there in November. I was invited to go out there and had a couple good business meetings out there. And it's a beautiful country. And I had a wonderful time that I was there. And it was 1 month after the hand happened, actually, in 2022. So it's been a very recent, vacation, I guess business trip that I had that I was there. And I will be back. There's a lot happening in Malta. It's good for the gaming industry.
Awesome. All right.
I hope to see you soon there.
Yeah, Robbi, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. We got to go to bed now.
Thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, Robbi. Cheers. Bye.